Hey everyone, thank you for joining us again. I am with my friend Aidan from Fortinet, and today we're going to be talking about something that I hear quite a bit, which is how do we take the toil from incident response and security operations, toil being those operations we do over and over and over again, and automate that so we're able to respond to it quicker and more efficiently. But also, how do we free up resources to focus on more critical, more high severity type tasks that could bring value into their security organization. And so I'm here to talk with Aidan more about this super cool tool that Fortinet has created. But I won't take all of the awesome news away from him, and I'll let him talk to him more about it. How about that?
Sounds great. I appreciate it, Kyle.
Awesome. So when it comes to like automation, what is it that Fortinet is hearing from the various customers that are utilizing AWS, and what are the challenges that they're trying to solve,
Yeah.
and what is it that you're able to provide them to solve those particular types of outcomes that they're looking to take care of?
Yeah. So, Kyle, I know you see this. We're going through this cycle where, there, especially around like financial services verticals and some others, where we have very large organizations, hyperscaled in their own rights, moving the entire organization to cloud. Some telco operators are good examples as well, where they are having to go really through an organizational change. And what they're realizing is, as so many have, is that with all of the signal velocity and signal volume, that they're not equipped from a human resources perspective to manage any of that, right? So they've got skill set deficiencies in the security space already, and then you add the cloud requirements and DevOps and so forth to that, it becomes a significant gap. And so our customers are asking us, all right, how can we, make that process more efficient, remove the toil, as you say, and it's really an effort on our part and on other providers, but also on AWS as well, to take the data that's available, take all of that signal, and make it useful, operationalize it, and then once it's part of operationalizing it, right? How do we get more effective value out of each SOC operator or security practitioner who's involved in providing security, right? And so, we've, stats like this, like 59 minutes out of every hour is used to identify a problem, and then that last minute is used to do some remediation, right? And so we want to shift that. We want to bring the remediation earlier into that hour and do a lot of that through automation. And so, with the data that AWS is sending us, it's well structured, well formed. We can grab it off message buses, and then we can start to normalize that data and then use it in ways that are really very simple for a security practitioner to implement, right? And what I mean by that is, they don't have to know how to do complex scripting, right? We can create very nuanced, situationally specific playbooks that can start to execute very nuanced, response strategies. And so that really starts to give us some control over all of that signal, and solve that problem. But it also gives the organization a way to think about this, to tailor the way they build their processes and the tooling that they use to support the organizational constructs of, because as customers, as AWS and Fortinet customers are moving to AWS, they really are refactoring IT as an organization to adopt cloud as a primary strategy. So I think what we want to do at Fortinet is, okay, can the tooling provide me opportunity to scale, and does it support the specific organizational constructs that I need to implement within my business if I'm a customer?
Yeah, and one of the things that does change when going from an on-prem environment, that you get to benefit from when using AWS is it's one giant API. So we're able to create these automations for operational, but we're focusing on security use cases here. Now,
Exactly.
what sort of, we could talk about all the different log sources and inputs that AWS can feed into the SOAR platform that Fortinet has. What are
Hmm.
some of the, I would say, common workflows that you have with your SOAR platform, and what log
Mhm.
sources are those utilizing within AWS?
Right. Well, I think the one place our customers, we typically direct them to start is looking at services like Security Hub, because that's your aggregation point coming out of your cloud estate, right? It's very easy to connect into. Minimal permissions need to be provided to a third party source to receive that data, right? We don't need all complicated IAM setups, and so you can start pumping that feed to a platform like what we've developed in FortiSOAR, and now I can take that that feed, that continual feed of information, and in real time start to act on it, right? So one, like taking the visibility of the entire estate, inventorying that, and then taking the information and building out situational rules. So and by the way, all of the connectors into these different services are already built in. So whether it's Security Hub or like directly you want to connect to S3 or CloudWatch or SNS or something like that, right? All of these different services can be consumed through this platform. You don't have to know them in depth. We give you a step-by-step walkthrough of how to configure some of the parameters, and you're up very quickly. You don't have to be a DevOps wizard. You don't have to write your own Lambda or anything like that necessarily. And then we give you basically you create a decision tree, and through that decision tree, these playbooks become very nuanced. If you look at what a lot of the cloud native protection platforms and the CW cloud workload protection platforms, CWPP products provide, it's very much binary. It's like, okay, it's either this setting or it's this other setting. It's either out of compliance or you can turn the knob this one way, and that we've seen a lot of issues with that, where you're trying to deploy infrastructure as code, and all of a sudden your code doesn't work, or objects are being manipulated, and you have no idea why. And it's because your security tooling doesn't have enough nuanced intelligence, and it's not really aligned to the processes and requirements that you've set up. And so we don't have to be binary. We can create a whole spectrum of outcomes based on the type of signals that we're receiving. So maybe I want to redirect a known malicious IP to a honeypot, or maybe I want to quarantine a particular workload from a particular set of users, not all users, or I want to, I can do that by, placing a security group on it. Or I can change maybe the IAM permissions for a particular user based on where they're located, right? Versus just blanket denying them access. So those are just some simple examples, but it's really whatever the operator can think of, we can do. And the idea, again, is to bridge the skill gap, right? So we're not expecting people to come in knowing how to script all of these activities. We provide a step-by-step, if you can find the parameters, right? Like your account IDs and your IAM roles and things like that, and populate the workflow, then it becomes very, very easy.
So it sounds like that this platform is able to take actions not only with Fortinet services, but with the AWS API, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, it's when security vendors talk with customers, they typically get this like vendor lock-in pitch, like, hey, we've got this platform, your mesh platform and all this stuff. But our approach to it has been, let the customer define the ecosystem. I think the value that we all demonstrate, whether, it should be apparent, right? And so we allow customers and support customers to define their own ecosystem. We integrate with different third-party services, oftentimes competitive systems, to allow the customer to execute on their security needs. And so, so this, our SOAR platform is very open. Our whole approach to ecosystem integration is very open. and we have hundreds and hundreds of connectors that are really turnkey into various security and other network and application services.
So when an organization, a security team is looking at a SOAR platform and to automate, what would be like some of the things that you would say, hey, here's some tidbits of advice when you're considering a SOAR platform and automating the tasks that you have for your security operations for your cloud environment?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, one, it goes back to firstly, like it's a people, process, tools, data problem always, or pretty typically, right? The people in the process come first. And I think that before you get to the which SOAR platform to choose, well, it kind of answers the question, but knowing, okay, here are my organizational requirements, here are the processes that I need, the workflows that I need to set up. And once your workflows are defined, then you can look at the tooling, right? So does the tooling support, firstly, the general workflows that I need, the level of granularity? Does it support and connect into the systems that are important to my organization, right? So typically a customer has other, a lot of different tooling, as I just mentioned. Does a SOAR platform support the automation of the various tooling that you already have committed? Does it support in the case of AWS, the AWS services to stream and operationalize the data in the way that is important to your organization, right? So it's one thing to receive data, but can I refactor data to make it more useful? Can I enrich it, as we say? And then once you've gotten to that point, does it provide the scalability for my practice in the way that is most beneficial? So can I create workflows very quickly, right? What's the level of effort and the management overhead of those workflows? And then are those workflows granular enough to accomplish my needs? And I think you'll see a lot of differentiation in the SOAR options available.
Those are really good points. One thing that I've worked with firsthand is when working with different platforms that integrate with an AWS environment is also how do we scale the integration of that platform into our AWS environment? Because new accounts get created, accounts get terminated, but when we're looking at account growth, especially for organizations that might say, hey, we use different accounts to limit scope of impact. How do we scale that integration so our automation, be it through SOAR or other automation tools that we leverage, are able to actually take action for when something. So how would Fortinet actually integrate with an AWS account?
So we would integrate with the account based on, we have this concept of connectors. Let me just simplify the technicals of it. So the connector, we have connectors that are generic, or we have connectors that are very specific. So like if you have a generic type webhook or API that you want to call a RESTful service, that can be supported. But if you have if you want to receive log detail via a message bus like SNS or like Security Hub, that is a bit different from just calling an API. And so we allow the customer to say, all right, well, I'm tied into this specific service. And so you can choose, basically, starts out as a tile. You select the tile that you like in the connector. You're asked to configure that connector. We validate that that connection is active into that service or successful into that service. And then you can start building workflows off of that, right? So you can get, I guess the takeaway is, if you know what AWS services you want to connect to, you simply provide the input, which the account ID would be part of that input, or the org ID if you have many accounts and you have overarching organizational units or org units tied to that. Yes, so it's basically tied to the specific services, I would say.
Great. So when an organization has figured out the people and process, and then they're looking for the technology to help, mitigate potentially, workforce or headcount or even just, be able to force multiply their functionalities or their abilities to respond to a security event.
Mhm.
Automation is really accelerating that. And SOAR platforms help us create those different ways of approaching even more complex automations, but
Mhm.
also in a reusable manner too.
Exactly. Absolutely. We can reuse those playbooks for in a copy paste way, right? So whether it's you have multiple organizations that you want to support, multiple accounts, and you want to deploy those specifically, on a per account basis, as an example, that can be done very easily, or um, you want to maybe start a new path in a decision tree, right, to get more granular. Those modules can be copied and added into other trees, workflows. Really, is what
Gotta
I
love
should be.
reusability because when you take
Absolutely.
a security event and then your lessons learned, and if there's a way to reuse existing
Mhm.
processes and build it out in a much quicker fashion, I mean, that I'm all for that, because
Yeah.
then you're able to implement that process and those workflows much quicker based on your
Mhm.
lessons learned, instead of having to refactor or even create from net new a new responsive workflow.
Exactly. Um, yeah, completely agree.
Awesome. Well, hey,
One of the things I'll mention is within our team here at Fortinet, we'll be creating playbooks that customers can just download, sort of open source, if you will, and you
that's
can
cool.
use that as a starting point and just something to further accelerate your adoption and success.
Cool. So you'll have AWS
Mhm.
specific workflows too, or
Yeah,
workflows for. Oh, that's really neat. That's a great starting point, I feel like.
absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things that our mutual customers can do is uh, they can get a hold of their Fortinet or AWS representative. We'd be more than happy to, walk them through what that automation looks like and how it can be specifically impactful for their business.
Awesome. Well, Aiden, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Automation, I'm a huge fan of removing the human out of the process, because we can repeat our incident response, but also allows our responders to focus on cooler things instead of, something that might be, an alert that just always constantly triggers and you need to just pull information. But also, how can we improve the mean time to respond to a security event? So, Aiden, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us. Catch us on AWS On Air every Friday. Back to it.
Thanks, Al.
See ya.